Imagine boarding a luxury business class flight, only to watch a wealthy white woman forcefully kick a well-dressed black man out of his first-class seat, screaming about people like him not belonging there. But what she doesn't know, that quiet, dignified man she just humiliated owns the entire airline. And in the next 3 hours, she's about to learn the most expensive lesson of her entitled life. Before we dive into today's incredible story of instant karma, please hit that subscribe button. It truly means the world to me when you join our community of justice lovers. Turn on those notifications so you never miss these satisfying comebacks. And drop your city in the comments below. I love seeing where all my amazing viewers are from. Now, let's get into this unbelievable story that proves karma always comes full circle. Marcus Williams adjusted his navy blue suit jacket as he walked through the premium check-in area at Miami International Airport. At 42, he carried himself with quiet confidence, the kind that comes from building something from nothing. His expensive briefcase held papers for the biggest business deal of his career, and his first-class ticket to Chicago was his small reward for months of grueling negotiations. But Marcus wasn't just any passenger boarding flight 447 that Tuesday morning. He was the founder and CEO of Skyward Airlines, the fastest-growing carrier in the Southeast. What had started as a dream in his grandmother's garage 12 years ago was now worth over $2 billion. Yet Marcus preferred to fly under the radar, literally and figuratively. He rarely announced his presence on his own flights, choosing instead to experience his airline through his customers' eyes. The boarding process began smoothly. Marcus presented his ticket to the gate agent, who smiled warmly as she scanned his first-class boarding pass for Seat 2A. As he walked down the jet bridge, Marcus felt that familiar pride seeing passengers board his aircraft. The cabin crew greeted him with professional courtesy, unaware they were serving their boss. Seat 2A was everything Marcus had designed it to be, spacious leather seating with premium amenities. He settled in, pulling out his tablet to review quarterly reports. The business class cabin filled quickly with the usual mix of executives, vacationers, and frequent flyers. Everything seemed perfect for a routine 3-hour flight. That's when she appeared. Victoria Pemberton strutted down the aisle like she owned the plane. At 55, she was the epitome of entitled wealth. Designer everything, perfectly styled blonde hair, an expression that suggested the world owed her something. Her oversized Chanel handbag knocked against several seats as she made her way forward, muttering complaints about the kind of people they let fly first class these days. Victoria stopped directly beside Marcus's row, consulting her boarding pass with theatrical confusion. She stared at the seat numbers, then at Marcus, then back at her ticket. Her expression shifted from confusion to indignation faster than a summer storm. "Excuse me," she said loudly, her voice dripping with false politeness. "I think there's been some sort of mistake here." Marcus looked up from his tablet, offering a gentle smile. "I'm sorry. Is there something I can help you with?" Victoria's eyes narrowed. She held up her boarding pass like evidence in a courtroom. "This is my seat. To a first class. I paid $15,000 for this ticket, and I expect to sit where I belong." Marcus glanced at his own boarding pass, clearly marked 2A. "I think there might be some confusion. This is my assigned seat as well. Perhaps we should call the flight attendant to help sort this out." But Victoria wasn't interested in reasonable solutions. Her voice rose another octave, drawing stares from nearby passengers. "Oh, I see what's happening here. Someone clearly made an error and double-booked this seat. But I can tell you right now, I'm not moving. I have status on this airline. I fly first class every week. I know how these things work." The subtext was clear, even if she didn't say it directly. Her eyes traveled from Marcus's face to his clothing, making assumptions based on nothing but the color of his skin. In her privileged world, there was no way a black man could legitimately occupy the same space she felt entitled to. Marcus remained calm, his grandmother's lessons about dignity echoing in his mind. "Ma'am, I understand you're frustrated. Let's just have the crew check both our reservations. I'm sure we can resolve this quickly." "Resolve this?" Victoria's laugh was sharp and ugly. "The only thing that needs resolving is you moving to where you actually belong. This is ridiculous. Flight attendant Sarah Chun heard the commotion from the galley and hurried over, her professional smile faltering as she assessed the situation. She'd been flying for 8 years and had seen this scenario play out too many times, usually with the same predictable outcome. "Good morning," Sarah said pleasantly. "I understand there's a seating issue. May I see both boarding passes?" Victoria thrust her ticket forward aggressively. "Finally, someone with authority. This man is in my seat, and I want him moved immediately. I don't care where you put him, coach, baggage claim. I don't care, but I paid for first class, and I'm sitting in first class." Marcus handed over his boarding pass calmly. Sarah examined both tickets carefully, her expression growing more confused. Both passengers were indeed assigned to seat 2A. This was unusual. The computer system rarely made such obvious errors. "I apologize for the confusion," Sarah said diplomatically. "It appears our system has double-booked this seat. Let me check with my supervisor and see what alternative arrangements we can make." "Alternative arrangements?" Victoria's voice carried across the cabin. "I don't need alternatives. I need this man moved. I have a very important business meeting in Chicago, and I specifically requested this seat because it has the best legroom and earliest meal service. I'm not compromising because of someone else's booking error." Other first-class passengers were openly staring now. Marcus noticed a few sympathetic looks, but also some uncomfortable shifting as people tried to avoid getting involved. He'd experienced this type of situation before, the way some people automatically assumed he didn't belong in spaces they considered their own. Sarah returned with purser Michael Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran who'd handled every possible customer service crisis. Michael examined the boarding passes and consulted his tablet, checking the passenger manifest. "Mrs. Pemberton," Michael said professionally, "I show that both you and Mr. Williams have valid tickets for seat 2A. This is highly unusual, and I apologize for the inconvenience. We have an available seat in 3C, also in first class, with identical amenities. Would you be willing to accept that accommodation?" Victoria's face flushed red. "Would I be willing? Would I be willing? I specifically booked 2A 3 months ago. I always sit in 2A. This is completely unacceptable service, and I guarantee heads will roll when I speak to your management." She turned to face Marcus directly, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper that somehow carried further than her shouting. "And you need to stop pretending you belong here. We both know what this is really about. People like you always try to take what isn't yours." The cabin fell silent. Even the background hum of pre-flight preparations seemed to pause. Marcus felt every eye in first class watching him, waiting to see how he'd respond to such blatant racism disguised as a seating dispute. Marcus stood slowly, his 6-foot frame unfolding with quiet dignity. His voice was steady and clear. "Ma'am, I'm not sure what you mean by people like me, but I can assure you my ticket is legitimate. I'm not trying to take anything from anyone." "Oh, please," Victoria scoffed. "Don't play innocent with me. I've seen this before, people getting upgraded they don't deserve, taking seats from paying customers." "Well, not today. Not on my watch." Michael and Sarah exchanged uncomfortable glances. This was escalating beyond a simple seating mix-up into something much more serious. But company policy was clear. They needed to resolve the situation quickly and diplomatically before departure was delayed. "Sir," Michael addressed Marcus, "would you be amenable to taking seat 3C? I can offer you a voucher for future travel as compensation for the inconvenience." Marcus looked around the cabin, seeing the mixture of embarrassment, anger, and expectation on various faces. He knew this moment would define not just his flight, but send a message about what behavior was acceptable on his airline. Still, he wasn't ready to reveal his identity. Not yet. "Of course," Marcus said graciously. "I'm happy to move if it helps resolve the situation." Victoria's smile was triumphant and ugly. Finally, some common sense, though I shouldn't have had to make such a fuss to get proper service. As Marcus gathered his belongings, Victoria was already claiming his seat, spreading her items across both armrests like a conquering army. She pulled out her phone and began loudly complaining to someone about the declining standards of air travel and the kind of people they let in first class now. Marcus settled into 3C, just one row behind his original seat. He could hear every word of Victoria's continued commentary. What she didn't know was that every complaint she made, every entitled demand, every racist assumption was being carefully noted by the owner of the very airline she was criticizing. The plane pushed back from the gate, right on schedule. As they climbed toward cruising altitude, Marcus opened his tablet and began typing. He wasn't reviewing quarterly reports anymore. He was planning something much more interesting. Once airborne, Victoria Pemberton transformed from merely unpleasant to absolutely insufferable. Having claimed her rightful seat, she seemed to believe she'd won some kind of victory that entitled her to treat the entire crew as her personal servants. "Excuse me," she snapped at Sarah during the pre-meal service. "This champagne is not the vintage I specifically requested when I booked. I clearly stated I wanted Dom Perignon 2015, not this inferior substitute." Sarah checked her notes carefully. "Ma'am, our first-class service includes Cru Grande Cuvée, which is actually more expensive than—" "I don't care about more expensive," Victoria interrupted. "I care about getting what I ordered. This is exactly the kind of substandard service I was talking about earlier. First, you can't manage your seating assignments properly. Now you can't even serve the correct champagne. What's next?" Marcus watched this exchange from 3C, his jaw tightening. Sarah was one of his best flight attendants, professional, kind, and genuinely caring about passenger experience. Watching her be berated for Victoria's imagined slights was becoming unbearable. But Victoria wasn't finished. During the meal service, she rejected her entree because it was too ethnic, despite ordering the herb-crusted salmon specifically. She demanded extra blankets, then complained they weren't soft enough. She criticized the temperature, the lighting, and even the angle of her seat recline. "In my day," she announced loudly to no one in particular, airlines understood class. They knew how to treat their premium customers. Now they're so focused on being politically correct and accommodating every type of person that standards have completely disappeared. An elderly gentleman across the aisle shifted uncomfortably. A young businesswoman pretended to be absorbed in her laptop. The tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut with a plastic knife. Then Victoria made her fatal error. She decided to make a phone call. "Jennifer? It's Victoria." "Yes, I'm on the plane." "Oh, you won't believe what happened. They tried to get my seat to some black guy who obviously didn't belong in first class. Can you imagine? I had to make quite a scene to get what I paid for." Marcus's fingers paused over his tablet keyboard. Around him, other passengers were openly staring now, their discomfort turning to disgust. Victoria continued her phone conversation, oblivious to the growing hostility around her. "I swear, these airlines are so desperate for diversity points that they'll upgrade anyone these days." The man was probably flying on some kind of charity ticket or employee discount. You know how they do things now, all about appearances instead of actual class. Sarah passed by Marcus's seat, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. She caught his eye and mouthed, "I'm sorry," apologizing for a passenger's behavior toward another passenger, something that shouldn't be necessary on any flight, especially his own. That's when Marcus made his decision. He opened his laptop and accessed the airline's internal communication system. As CEO, he had override authority for all flight operations. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, sending a series of messages that would change the trajectory of this flight entirely. His first message went to the captain. "Captain Rodriguez, this is CEO Marcus Williams. I'm aboard your flight as passenger in 3C. We have a situation developing that will require special handling upon arrival in Chicago. Please prepare for priority deplaning and have ground security standing by." His second message went to Chicago operations. "Prepare VIP reception for incoming passenger Victoria Pemberton, Flight 447. Full executive welcome protocol. Have senior management team present at gate." His third message was to corporate communications. "Prepare media statement regarding discrimination incident aboard Flight 447. Standard protocol for reputation management." Victoria was still loudly broadcasting her prejudiced views when Marcus sent his final message. This one to the flight crew. Please inform passenger in 2A that the airline CEO would like to personally welcome her to Chicago. Do not mention I am aboard. Arrange for her to be first off the aircraft. Marcus leaned back in his seat, watching Victoria continue her performance of entitlement and bigotry. She had no idea that every word was being noted, every action was being observed, and every assumption she'd made was about to spectacularly backfire. The flight continued toward Chicago, with Victoria growing more demanding by the hour. She complained about the Wi-Fi speed, the movie selection, and even the turbulence, as if Marcus personally controlled the weather. Each complaint was another nail in the coffin of her own making. As they began their descent into O'Hare, Sarah approached Victoria with a bright smile. "Mrs. Pemberton, I have wonderful news. Our CEO has requested to personally welcome you to Chicago. You'll be our first passenger to deplane, and there will be a special reception waiting for you at the gate." Victoria's eyes lit up with greed and satisfaction. Well, finally, someone in management with sense. I knew my complaints would get attention. It's about time this airline recognized the importance of treating their premium customers properly. She shot a smug look back at Marcus. "You see, this is what happens when you know how to demand proper service. Some people just accept whatever treatment they get, but I know my worth." Marcus smiled and nodded politely, his tablet carefully concealing the final preparations he was making for Victoria's very special welcome to Chicago. As Flight 447 touched down at O'Hare International Airport, Victoria Pemberton was practically vibrating with anticipation. She'd spent the last hour of the flight telling anyone who would listen about her upcoming meeting with the airline CEO, convinced that her complaints had elevated her to VIP status. Finally, an airline that understands customer service, she announced to the cabin as they taxied to the gate. When you know how to speak up for yourself, companies listen. It's really quite simple. Marcus remained seated in 3C, watching Victoria gather her belongings with self-satisfied enthusiasm. Through the small window, he could see the ground crew positioning the jet bridge. He could also see something Victoria couldn't, a small group of people in business suits waiting on the tarmac near the gate entrance. Sarah approached Victoria as the seatbelt sign turned off. "Mrs. Pemberton, the CEO's executive team is ready for you. If you'll follow me, we'll escort you off first." Victoria preened like a peacock. "Excellent. This is exactly the kind of treatment premium passengers should expect." She grabbed her Chanel bag and stood imperiously, looking down the aisle. "I hope the rest of you are taking notes. This is how you get results." As Victoria made her grand exit, Marcus quietly gathered his own belongings. The irony wasn't lost on him. She was rushing toward a meeting she thought would vindicate her behavior, while he was taking his time, knowing exactly what awaited her. The gate area was bustling with typical airport activity, but Marcus could see his executive team positioned strategically near the jet bridge exit. Regional Director Janet Morrison stood with Customer Relations Manager David Park and Legal Affairs Director Rebecca Chen. They looked appropriately serious for what was about to unfold. Marcus hung back, positioning himself where he could observe but remain unnoticed. Through his earpiece, standard equipment for airline executives, he could hear the ground crew's radio chatter and knew his instructions were being followed perfectly. Victoria emerged from the jet bridge like a conquering hero, her head held high and her expression triumphant. She immediately spotted the business-suited group and marched over with purpose. "I assume you're here about my complaints regarding today's flight," she began without introduction. "I have to say, I'm impressed that management is taking this seriously. Too many airlines ignore their premium customers these days." Janet Morrison stepped forward with professional composure. "Mrs. Pemberton, I'm Janet Morrison, Regional Director. Thank you for flying with us today. I understand you had some concerns about your flight experience." "Concerns?" Victoria laughed harshly. "I had a complete breakdown of service standards. First, your incompetent gate staff double-booked my seat, forcing me to deal with someone who clearly didn't belong in first class. Then your crew couldn't even serve the correct champagne vintage. The whole experience was absolutely unacceptable." David Park made notes on his tablet while Rebecca Chun recorded the conversation. Standard procedure for customer service incidents. They exchanged glances that Victoria interpreted as acknowledgement of her legitimate grievances. "I'm glad to see you're taking this seriously," Victoria continued, warming to her theme. "As someone who flies first class exclusively, I can tell you that standards have declined drastically. You're letting the wrong sort of people into premium cabins, and it's ruining the experience for your actual high-value customers." "The wrong sort of people?" Janet asked carefully. "Oh, you know exactly what I mean," Victoria said with a conspiratorial wink. "People who clearly don't belong there. People who probably got upgraded for diversity reasons instead of actually paying for premium service. It's political correctness run amok, and it's destroying the airline industry." Marcus watched from 30 feet away as Victoria continued digging her own grave with every word. Other passengers from his flight were deplaning now, many of them looking curiously at the intense discussion happening near the gate. "Mrs. Pemberton," Rebecca Chun interjected smoothly, "would you mind if we moved this conversation somewhere more private? Our CEO is very interested in hearing about your experience directly." Victoria's eyes lit up with greed. "The CEO wants to meet with me personally? Well, of course he does. When someone with my status and experience speaks up, smart executives listen." As the group began moving toward the airline's executive offices, Marcus fell into step about 20 feet behind them. His own employees didn't notice him yet. They were too focused on managing Victoria's increasingly inflammatory commentary. "I hope your CEO understands that I'm not some complainer," Victoria continued as they walked. "I'm offering constructive feedback about the declining quality of your customer base. When you let just anyone into first class, it degrades the entire experience for people who actually deserve to be there." Marcus smiled grimly as they approached the executive conference room. In just a few minutes, Victoria Pemberton was about to meet the CEO she'd been demanding to see. The only question was whether she'd recognize him from seat 2A. Victoria Pemberton's escort from O'Hare International Airport was neither gentle nor private. As security led her through the terminal, her protests echoed off the walls, drawing stares from hundreds of travelers. Her designer luggage rolled behind her like a funeral procession for her own arrogance. "This is discrimination," she shouted as they passed gate after gate. "I'm being persecuted for standing up for proper customer service." But her words rang hollow in the vast terminal space. Fellow travelers looked on with mixture of curiosity and judgment, sensing they were witnessing the consequences of bad behavior rather than injustice. Meanwhile, Marcus Williams stood in the executive conference room, looking out at the runway, where Skyward Airlines planes moved with precision and purpose. His team remained seated, processing what they'd just witnessed. "Sir," Janet Morrison said carefully, "should we prepare any additional statements for media relations?" Marcus shook his head. "I don't think that will be necessary. Mrs. Pemberton will find that her threats to ruin us carry very little weight. Our reputation speaks for itself." And it did. Skyward Airlines had built its success on treating every passenger with dignity and respect. Marcus's grandmother had taught him that true class wasn't about money or status. It was about how you treated people who couldn't do anything for you. That philosophy was woven into every aspect of his company's culture. "What about her threats to sue?" Rebecca Chin asked. Marcus smiled. "Let her try. We have recordings of her discriminatory behavior, witness statements from crew and passengers, and documentation of her false claims about her status with our airline. Any lawyer worth their fee will advise her to drop it quickly." David Park closed his tablet. "I have to say, sir, I've never seen karma work quite so efficiently." "The universe has a way of balancing things out," Marcus agreed. "Mrs. Pemberton assumed I didn't belong in first class because of my race. She never considered that I might actually own the airline." As news of the incident spread through social media, other passengers had been filming Victoria's meltdown. Public reaction was swift and decisive. The hashtag Karma at 30,000 feet began trending, with overwhelming support for Marcus and condemnation for Victoria's behavior. One passenger tweeted, "Watched a racist woman force a dignified black man out of his first-class seat today. Plot twist, he owns the airline. Justice served at cruising altitude." Another wrote, This is what happens when you judge people by their skin color instead of their character. That CEO showed more class in his response than she showed in her entire tantrum. Victoria's threats to destroy the airline never materialized. Instead, the incident became a powerful example of corporate leadership standing up against discrimination. Skyward Airlines saw a surge in bookings as customers expressed support for Marcus's principled stand. 3 months later, Marcus received a handwritten letter. It was from Victoria Pemberton's adult daughter, apologizing for her mother's behavior and expressing hope that the incident might serve as a wake-up call. The letter mentioned that Victoria had been asked to leave her country club and was facing social consequences for her public display of racism. Marcus filed the letter away, not out of vindictiveness, but as a reminder that actions have consequences and change is possible even for people who seem set in their ways. This story reminds us that respect and dignity should never depend on someone's appearance, race, or perceived status. Victoria's downfall wasn't caused by bad luck. It was the inevitable result of treating others poorly based on prejudiced assumptions. Marcus's response teaches us about the power of quiet dignity in the face of discrimination. He could have revealed his identity immediately and humiliated Victoria publicly, but instead he allowed her behavior to speak for itself while documenting everything professionally. The airline crew's discomfort during Victoria's racist tirade shows how discrimination affects everyone in the environment, not just the direct target. Bystanders have a responsibility to speak up when they witness injustice. Most importantly, this story illustrates that true class and character are revealed not by what you demand, but by how you treat others, especially those you believe have less power than you do. In our interconnected world, treating people with basic human dignity isn't just morally right, it's also practical wisdom. You never know who you're really talking to, and the person you disrespect today might be the person with the power to shape your tomorrow. The golden rule remains golden for a reason. Treat others as you would want to be treated, because karma has a way of ensuring that's exactly what happens.